Merit has been really fortunate for 5 years, 6 years, for a period of extended support from Physician Services Incorporated. And I think it's important for us in the Ontario context to have some kind of awareness of how they're supporting health services and health education research. This is a little bit about their background, and this is what they aspire to achieve. If you are engaged in health research, including medical education, they have an access to resources to support peer-reviewed research in a way that is open and has a period of funding that I think is mildly unique in the system. They supply and provide investigator-supported funding. They support resident research. And of course, as I move through all these slides, you think, oh, that applies to me. How do I find more? I will direct you to these resources rather than walking you through in exquisite detail. Of note, there's areas that they feel are funded differently within our province and would not want to have a duplicative process. And so they're looking to be a funder that fills gaps. What I find interesting is the responsiveness as an organization. They have a rolling submission, so you do not need to be in a panic in February, as many of us are as we look to Tri-Council, and a fairly rapid turnaround time. They are also very invested and engaged in knowledge translation and offer funding to support a variety of scholarly lines of inquiry. And you can see a success rate here for the funding of projects that I think shows at least it's an organization for you to consider if you've not considered before, because the time and effort that we all take in putting together grants and applications needs to have some sense of what will be the possibilities that arise here. So from us to PSI, and unfortunately, the PSI representative couldn't be with us today for some extenuating circumstances. I thank you for support for this year through this unrestricted grant to make possible bringing in the speakers that you've met, an opportunity for us to be together and for us to make this possible. So thank you to PSI. Wow, what a day. I hope you have been challenged. I hope you are energized even after you've delivered a lot of energy. The speakers have all shared with me that they can feel the receptivity, the engagement. This is our last moment. You've met all the speakers with the exception of Dr. Cheryl Poth. Dr. Poth is a professor and award-winning instructor at the Center for Research in Applied Measurement and Evaluation at the University of Alberta. That just got me in trouble somewhere. I was thinking that the name of your center is as long as merit. She's a founding board member for the Mixed Methods International Research Association and served as its 4th president in 2018-19. And most notably, in one of the drivers for Merit's interest and engagement in mixed methods research is she was our inaugural visiting professor from 2023 to 25. So thank you and welcome, Cheryl. You've heard her alluded to in some of our conversations today. There's not a structure here, but I suspect you came to this day with something that you wanted to address or solve, or as a stimulant for you to come here today. Or there might be a point or a topic that was brought up, but it never came to the conclusion that you thought was going to happen, and before the questions took another turn. We don't promise that you can leave here with everything solved and resolved, but we want to give you an opportunity to open some questions. I have my first question, and they don't know what it is, so this is not canned. Sometimes in rooms like this, when you see people who are so successful, and if you've Google scholared them, you say, oh my gosh. And at least in me, it posits this profound imposter syndrome. So if you're comfortable, I'd love to hear a mixed methods research blunder. from your career, if you're comfortable to tell us, with de-identifying your co-investigators or the sources. But I'd like to hear a oof, that landed a bit flat. I've also indicated that they don't have to answer all the questions. And in fact, preferably they don't answer all the questions. So we have time for a variety.
Okay. I don't know if it's a blunder, but it's something that made me really sad and made me recognize some of the limitations of the structures. When we did a mixed methods study to develop and evaluate the effectiveness of an intervention for nurses to use to identify and respond to intimate partner violence, I was methodologically rigid, right? Like designed what I thought was such a great mixed methods study, all the right things, the mixed method question, looking for points of integration. The research team that I was on was like, this has to go to JAMA. I was the only nurse on the team, even though it was a nursing intervention, but it's about child abuse prevention and violence prevention. And so I was spurred on by these incredible mentors and methodologists on our research team, Michael Boyle and Harriet McMillan, and they're like, yes, this can go into JAMA. And so I wrote this beautiful mixed methods paper for JAMA, and they were like, well, some of the comments were someone really sort of likes nurses. And I was like, well, it's a nursing intervention. And then what's all this other stuff that's messing up the trial? And it made me really disappointed that in order to get the paper published there, we had to strip all the mixed methods and all the qualitative stuff out. So now more senior, I don't know if I would have picked a different journal. I don't know, but I don't know if it was a little bit of a blunder in our decision making, but I mean, it sits there. But it was really disappointing, and because of word count and structures, to see all that richness and integration be stripped and ending up having to publish different parts in different places. Yeah.
I don't know if this is really a blender either, but I think when she was talking, I just think I always try to do too much. I always try to have like the Cadillac or whatever the new model. We don't talk about Cadillacs anymore, but whatever the fanciest, most intricate methodology and method set that I can put together, or that I can think of, that's what I want to do. And then the feasibility is not there. So I've been trying to think through a bit more like what's good enough, like what's sufficient for the purpose. It's not gonna, it doesn't have to be everything. It has to be good enough for this.
So to tack to the other valence of emotion, can you tell us about an unexpected joy in your mixed method research career?
Great, thanks. Yeah, I love that question. I would say, publishing the integrated findings from my PhD. So, so finished up in 2014, published the quant and qual papers separately, and then really and it was like, okay, I'm done, I'm defended, and then the chance to publish the integrated results and recraft it as a methodological paper, published it in JMMR, reached out to Dr. Gooderman and say, hey, would you provide some methodological expertise here? It was, very, very bold of me, and lovely that Tim agreed. And so that was a real, just a real high moment. So, yeah.
I would say helping folks do important research. I've had some doctoral students who had been told they couldn't do certain research because there wasn't enough of the participants. And these are very important low incident populations. They had been working, and we were able to craft a research design that would satisfy folks with both qualitative and quantitative. In this case, it was clinical, factors along with experiences. Using a case study and a case study of 4 was sufficient for a doctoral study. And I remember thinking, hey, like we can do this, and we can study, and we can provide ways of being able to study populations that deserve and voices, and we don't always need to reach these large population studies. So that was I think one of those moments where I was like, I think this could really change the way that we think and we do research.
Let me turn to you. What are the questions that you want to pose, or we'd also welcome a comment too.
Hello, I'm Paige. Thank you all so much for being here, and I really enjoyed being a part of today. I am a PhD candidate in health research methodology and a trainee. And so I'm curious, for those of you who are willing to answer, if you could go back to when you were a trainee and a young mixed methodologist, what piece of advice would you give to yourself that you would share for us today?
I'm not that far away from my PhD yet. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm getting there. But I think I used to be more stodgy, like, you didn't do that thing correctly, or that's not the way that you use that theory, and just a bit more rigid. And now I'm a bit more like, what are we trying to do here? And how are we going to do it? So there's just more explanation and less like believing that things are real things. Like interpretive description, not a real thing. Phenomenology, not a real thing. Sequential design's not a real thing. Like these are all things that we made up, but that are tools and vehicles that we can use, but also mess with, take apart, discard with intention.
I think you're doing right here, right now, building up your methodological literacy. And that also opened up mine. That I was in my first year of my doctoral program when I went to Long Island to take this course from this week long, and I invested in myself, knowing that this was the time to do it. Weirdly enough, you will never have so much time as you do now. I know it doesn't seem like it, but it is that idea that at least you begin to know what you don't know and begin to learn some of the new things and taking. And so I did the same thing in, both qualitative and quantitative, as well as mixed methods, and just really, I wanted to set myself up so I could be part of those conversations. And I do think, wherever you want to go in a research, or if I can speak more than one research style, then I think that actually distinguishes you in itself.
I strongly agree with that last one. If you can come out of the HRM or any program saying, I can answer any question, whether it's, I have review methodology, some working knowledge of qualitative, mixed, quant, stats, great. And if I could go back now, or if I was a student now, anything around AI, almost every table I've sat at today, right? Should we be using, how can we use AI in mixed methods? Max QDA and NVivo now have AI built into their software systems. So start to think about and answering those questions, and the transparency and the rigor. And then what is going to be our role as methodologists as some of those analytic skills are taken up? Yeah.
And if I can, I'll finish this, push the submit button, because then it actually gets submitted. But it takes a little bit to build that confidence, right? Yeah.
I just have a quick question about when you're submitting grant proposals that are mixed methods. What is a non-negotiable that you wouldn't cut if there were word counts, things that you had to cut down? Is it the mock joint display? Is it explaining a chart about your parallel convergent design? Like, what is the piece that you would never exclude?
So I would keep something about your mixed methods design. For me, that's non-negotiable. It could be a procedural diagram. I often use tables instead of a diagram. So a table that lists by aim what your procedures of data collection analysis are going to be and what the outcome of integration you anticipate. For me, that's really a non-negotiable in a grant.
The word integration, you'd be surprised at how many I have reviewed where that isn't included. And so I think that word. Because I do a search.
I'll add too, like, I know, people can criticize jargon, but every field has it. We have it in, when you have an RCT proposal, there's jargon, right? And I think as a reviewer, it signals to me that, you know what you're talking about, right? So I think using MMR terminology is important. And in addition to the points here, I think having, an overall MMR question or objective, and then your individual quant and qual objectives, I think that's important too. So it's all important.
I kind of agree and kind of disagree. Like there's so many times when you see jargon as a stand-in for what people are actually doing. And I think like there's a lot of qual terms that are like that. We reach saturation, and if better to leave that term out than to like put it in there and not tell me what you mean by it, because it will just be annoying. And I think sometimes in the effort to attain credibility, there can be a lot of terminology, and I would just really rather say what happened or what you plan to do in the grant. But that said, like there are moments when there's just a right word that can fit that situation. So if the word saturation is what's meaningful, you should use the word saturation. If the word sufficiency is what's meaningful, you should use sufficiency. Like for example, in constructivist grounded theory, if you don't see the words theoretical saturation or theoretical sufficiency, then it's a red flag for me that you didn't think through your sampling procedures, or maybe you didn't even read the primary text. So there's a balance, like don't be jargony, but also read that primary text and make sure you're using the right procedures.
Yeah, totally agree.
Hello, thank you. It's me again. I'm Abigail. I'm in my first year of my master's in nursing. I'm not doing a mixed methods study. However, this has raised a lot of curiosity. And a lot of the language that I hear is, I guess, the word count. The word count. And in that sense, if in a way, it seems as though when you're reporting mixed method research, for your method section, you're talking about your qual, your quant, and I guess the integration of it. So in that sense, as a novice researcher who understands that these are certain barriers, I guess, within publications, is there any advocacy in the sense that maybe for quality mixed method research, maybe there should be an increase in the word count to kind of, I guess, for, I guess, researchers to be able to actually explicitly and in-depth report their methods? And if not, then how does a novice researcher like myself, how am I able to, I guess, succinctly yet still rigorously report my methods in such a way that I guess it meets all the criteria of a mixed method research?
I feel like that's like such a big issue in qualitatively driven mixed methods and mixed methods as well, is that like when there are words, it increases your word count. Like by definition, if you want to represent participants' voices, that's a problem. And I do see increases in word counts, at least in the journals that I publish in. So that's kind of happening. But other thoughts. One of the thoughts is that the thing where people are like, the word counts are too small, so we need to do qual and then quant and then mixed, and that's the only way to break up a study, seems very lazy to me sometimes. Like, of course, there's multiple ways to break up a study, and that's just the one we're most familiar with. So could we be more creative in what the most useful way is to deploy the findings that we have? And like for me too, we all get stuck in these like ways of doing things. But then the other thing that I think is really helpful is thinking about visualization, because these visuals like really can use 1,000 words, right? They take up space, but they also help you communicate really quickly if you do it succinctly. And a plug for this book chapter that I've been raving about by Peggy Shannon Baker, where she kind of explains the process of developing a qualitatively oriented mixed methods joint display, showing how you kind of continue to represent participant voice, even though words take up space and are hard to represent in a design diagram. I can't remember the name of it, but I would be happy to share it when I find it. What else?
I do think visuals, so I will often do a design visual and then write to it, so what I would want you to get out of it. I think that really helps me to figure out what does my reader need in describing the design, because sometimes I can be more succinct than what I am the first go. So I would say drafting that and deciding. And I think in mixed methods in particular, focusing in on the information that's needed to understand the integration can be a really helpful way of going about it. So that would be one way that I would say that I manage. I do think it's a challenge, and I certainly see that in the health publications in particular, that there's just not enough space for a comprehensive methodology. I agree.
Hi, so Serena Eisenberg, I'm a health services mixed methods researcher at the University of Ottawa. I have two questions. The first one is about funding of sequential mixed methods studies. So I've had challenges in the past with several mixed methods research proposals that are sequential, in that, the first phase is very clearly defined. And then in the grant application, I say, well, the second one is really contingent on the first. And so, bear with me, reviewer, have patience, but trust me that we will design something fabulous if you fund me. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Do you have any advice for those in the room who might be putting in mixed methods grant proposals that have a sequential nature?
You would have.
So most of my grants are going to the National Institutes of Health, just to clarify. But I think it's similar in many ways. Almost all of mine as a PI or as a co-I are sequential, typically explanatory sequential, sometimes multi-phase. I would never leave it very contingent. I write it with a clear plan instead, and I leave the caveat that we will adapt it based on the results of the initial phase. And I might even give a for example when writing that. So, should we learn XYZ, we can adjust our sampling strategy accordingly or change our interview questions. But I always go with a solid plan for people. I thought you were going to go another direction, talking about there's kind of a dependence between phases. So what if the first phase fails, then what do you do? So just to touch on that, because I think it's all part of a sequential design. I also think it's important to have a plan, but then also to indicate sort of a backup plan should that not work out as you intend, to show the reviewer that you can still move forward even if you don't learn what was anticipated in that initial phase of the study.
I don't usually have a big plan, but you do have an idea of what you might see. So I think the advice that I give on that is usually that, like, you tell them what you think you might see, because they need to know what that phase could look like, right? We're going to do an intervention, like, okay, but what kind of intervention do you think it might be? Like, what are your ideas based on what you know from the literature, theory, other research you've done, that you can anticipate what the possibilities are? So it's like, for example, we anticipate that with these populations, we might best do this, or for example, if this, then this, and it just kind of fleshes it out without creating certainty that impacts your credibility, right? Like if you say this depends on this, and then you're certain about what the next phase is, they say, why are you doing this if you already know that? Don't you need to be creative and be open to the data that you see in the first phase, especially the first phase is qual, right? Like you're exploring, you need to be open to that exploration, so you can't foreclose the next phase. You wanna add?
I have also leveraged seed funding for an intentionally designed thing, so that I can demonstrate that, maybe my bigger grant is for this second phase and I've already completed the first phase. And so sometimes I find that takes away some of the questions of whether or not there's a feasibility piece. And that can be really helpful if you're also working with a team for the first time. You have already, completed something together, and that can be quite helpful, in terms of thinking about that.
I also Based on pilot interviews. Like if you've done a few interviews, you can say based on this thing that we do know, and then that shows that you've done some groundwork and that you have an idea about what might come next.
Yeah, really great question. And I'll just add that, of course, it depends on the panel, right? And sort of openness and receptivity to sequential approaches, designs, and also your timeline, right? So I've seen like some projects where it's, a 2-year timeline, and it feels like the panel or reviewers can get on board with that versus a 5-year timeline, right? Not as much. So yeah, thinking through some of those practicalities and then also the reality of the chance of who you get. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? In health professions education and health services, we see lots of studies self-identified as mixed methods. But when I read them, it feels much more like a multi-methods. Sarah, you alluded a little bit to that, but I'd be happy to hear why is there a need for disambiguation? Or why is it unclear when I'm reading something reported as mixed methods and it doesn't feel mixed to me?
Sorry, Jonathan, what's the question?
Why do you think we see in health professions education or in health services trials that are labeled as mixed methods when I'd probably adjudicate them as multi-methods?
Right. Yeah, I think multi-pronged. I think, sometimes there's a lack of expertise or, right? I'll read those grants and I'll think, well, where's your mixed methodologist, right, on the team? We were talking about this, Susan mentioned this, I think in her talk, and we were talking about this last night, so very CIHR specific, but if you're doing a RCT, you've got to use their template. And I have reviewed those grants where I feel bad for the team because they're wanting to do, an RCT with an embedded qual strand, and they're just the template doesn't fit. So I don't know. I think some of those structural pieces can be at play.
I think the elephant in the room is just that you now have maybe more exposure than some people doing mixed methods from a day talking with other people. And so if there's folks who are going to plan, I mean, this is your opportunity to build networks even here on campus and to connect, and if you want to know more, I'll make a plug for Merit that just keep your eyes out for workshops in the new year. If you want to kind of put your feet down in some other expertise training. But remembering that I teach a mixed methods class. I'm a first generation instructor. And what that means is I did not take a mixed methods class. I'm making it up as I go along, and my course has evolved considerably over the past dozen years because we're on the front end of this, and so that can be exciting and it can be scary. But and so part of that too is I think the reason why we're not seeing it is that we're still in the figuring out what the quality expectations are as Sarah's project is working on that. So I think it's an educative thing, and I think it's a reviewer thing, and I think it's an editorial thing, and I think we're going to see a lot of changes in the future. I don't see some things that are published anymore. I think so I am hopeful for our future as we talk about these things in rooms like this. Anything?
Hello. If all of you were attached to the GRAMS 2.0 project, where you have to reformulate or create like a new and improved guideline for what it means to make a solid mixed methods study, what would you personally include? And is there anything other than perhaps the lack of emphasis on integration that you find problematic about the original guideline?
I would say feasibility. So mixed methods, it can't, it often doesn't have to be, as sometimes as big. So I think it's being intentional in the integration and in the planning of the integration. That's probably where I'll finish.
I think one aspect missing is, however you want to label it, limitations or validity threats. thinking through some of those.
It's good.
Yeah, great question. I think like the timing piece, right? Like just that issue of like the reality is sometimes you publish, two qual studies and then followed by your quant studies, and then then you publish your MMR study. So a little bit of like, I don't know, that sort of that longitudinal nature of the work. Just thinking, will be a consideration. I'm thinking more too about, how we use reporting guidelines, right? And just thinking more about that. Like, I think, oftentimes it is once the study's almost done, we're about to submit to the journal, but oftentimes people are looking at it for guidance to like help me, guide me through how to do this. And we see that not just in mixed methods. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about as we launch this work.
My thing, you're all gonna roll your eyes, but my thing is sufficiency. I think I want people to make an argument for why they have enough data and analysis for the thing that they produced and the question that they asked. Because I think all the stuff we have around sufficiency in qual is unique to qual, and we don't really know what's sufficient relative to qual's role in the study. And I think likewise, like the way people think about p-values in quant, like it doesn't need necessarily to be a full quant study to support the qualitative piece, but it depends on the questions you're asking and the method and the different methods role relative to each other. And I think we don't have great guidance. And we also haven't invited people to explain that very well. Like, what makes you think it's good enough to support your findings?
And the part that I'd like to see more people report on is the work that happens over the arrow. So most people, if they're mapping out a sequential design, right, qualitative, then there's an arrow to the quantitative, or quantitative, and then the arrow to the qualitative. Something happens over that arrow. So let's write about those methods. And Rosie at the back, Rosie, wave. We've just had these conversations. She's going to do she's going to do multiple methods qualitative up front to understand what are the content and structures to put into an educational intervention. But the question is, well, so how are you going to use the qualitative information to create an educational intervention? Because most people write things up and they say, we did the qualitative work and here's all the content topics, and now we're evaluating the intervention for its impact on knowledge and skills. I want to know how did you use the qualitative? Let's write about those methods. What happens over the arrow? That's what I'd put in.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to, I also don't think I'd like to see more in our use of theory in terms and conceptual, what's guiding us conceptually. I don't know whether I can put that in there yet.
Maybe we'll end on this. Is there any last comments that you as panelists want to share with us? You came here with an agenda, structured to your presentation, but there might have been some points that you want to reemphasize, or a thread that you want to kind of bring to a conclusion from our conversation today. To get this crowd speechless is the first. I feel quite accomplished, actually.
Maybe I'll say, like, I was so impressed with how you all jumped into the discussion questions and tried it. So I have no doubt you can all jump into this. Give it a go and, talk to other people and work through where you find challenges. It's part of the process and part of the learning. It's how we advance a field and then write about it. And let's move, let's bring integration into the conversation in your publications. And I look forward to seeing what you do.
Try out a joint display. I'm not going anywhere. You can send me an email if you want reactions to a draft. I love to see that kind of product happening over time. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, maybe similar to Cheryl, like just a bit of a call to action like this, we're still this is an exciting time to be in the field. We're still, learning and growing. And so you all have contributions to make to the field. And so, write about it, write about those messy middles, right? Because we all learn from that and the field grows. So as I say, a bit of a call to action to contribute your experiences. It'll make a difference.
Maybe I'll build on that and say that people are really nice. Like, if you email Cheryl Poth, she will not be mean to you and she will get excited. Yeah, so I think like there's a surprising amount of niceness in mixed methods research and generosity, and I think that's what we want to bring to the field. So I think mostly, I'm sure there's mean people everywhere, but mostly people are pretty nice, and you should reach out if you have questions, whether that means a quick consult or whether it means like you end up working together. There's lots of different ways to engage.
But Tim's nicer.
And I think just ending on that, it's a team-based sport, right? It's really hard to do all of this on your own or have all the expertise. And the fun of mixed methods is having a team.
So on that note, I think it's time for us to bring our day to nearly a close. In a moment, I'll invite you to a reception where you have an opportunity to have more informal or continue your conversations, but in a more informal setting. A bunch of thank yous are necessary to make a day like today happen. And the first is want to return to PSI with a thanks for their grant. As part of that, we are able to take a portion of that funding and offer within the Faculty of Health Sciences a peer-reviewed grant competition to support a trial that was using mixed methods as part of their approach to answer a question. We're very pleased to announce that the successful principal investigator is Dr. Elif Biljik. This grant will support investigating the changes in residency as a result of the competency-based movement and how there is a readiness to practice in transition from training into independent practice. The biggest thank of the day should be the Merit team. I want to specifically call out Samantha and Emily and Jasmine who have been here today. All that good stuff where it felt like it was just seamless, that's them 100%. So thank you very much for what you've done. I also want to thank the facilitators at the tables for coordinating those conversations, ensuring that all voices were able to participate in making that conversation at the small group part of the larger group discussion that we had. This is the stuff that Merit is excited about, and there's new faces here. So we would love for you to think about how you might want to be part of our community. As an example, December 2nd, we are having our next in-person event held here at DBHSC at 5:30. It's part of our monthly wildcard topic, where we take a topic relevant to health professions education, and we have a semi-facilitated structured conversation, meaning there's no destination. We have a starting point, and that's about all that we can really predict. On the 2nd, we're going to be talking about processes for clinical placement selection. And then final bit of housekeeping. I have a long list here from Sam. She keeps texting me new things, so I have to keep looking at my phone. On your table, you'll see a QR code. If that's not your jam, very soon in your email inbox, there's going to be a link to an evaluation form. You'll find that we're very receptive to the things you love, the things you hate, the things you think are missing, so that when we think of offering this in the future, we're very responsive to the needs that make sense for you. We will take your name tags at the end. Please join us for a little bit more time of kind of connecting and networking. And thank you for your participation. Have a great day.